Trump says, everyone, keep oil prices down. I'm watching. You're playing right into the hands of the enemies. Don't do it. Yeah. I mean, Trump knows that oil is going to go up because he just bombed Iran, and they literally said that they are going to shut down the pipeline. It's ridiculous. I mean, what does he expect? You know, oil prices are going to be on a halt for 20% of the world's oil. You know, Trump just doesn't care. He likes to do whatever he wants to do, and then proceed to play like he's the victim. Classic narcissist move. And then as soon as what is inevitably going to happen happens, he tells everybody it is the left-wing lunatics that are making gas prices go up. And it's fucking ridiculous, dude. Let's check out this clip of the U.S. base in Qatar being bombed.
Allahu Akbar. Madam.
Hey, Shatterfuckface. How you doing? PH. Yeah, so my understanding is there were something like 6 missiles launched at them. Let's see. Breaking American Patriot missile defense system activating as Iran launches 6 missiles towards U.S. forces in Qatar. So basically, Trump is putting our men and women in danger because he felt like it, you know? It's like we knew this was going to happen. We got bases all over the place in the Middle East, and yet he still launches attacks in the Middle East. It doesn't take a goddamn genius to know that that's what's going to happen, you know? Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say about who am I? What's up? I don't know what to say about, you know, our bases being bombed. I mean, it's an obvious retaliation result of America bombing Iran. You know, Iran's right here. There's water, and then Qatar's right there. Like it's one of the more obvious choices to shoot at. I would have hoped it would have went more towards Israel because they're the ones that are, you know, really pushing for these wars and stuff. But it sends more of a statement if you do it towards the place that is actually going up against you. So let's take a look at this. The son of Iran's last Shia says he's ready to take over the Iranian leadership and lead the country's transition to democracy. So we already have this dude on the stands like, excuse me, can you please choose me for regime change? I would really like to be the new leader of the regime change. As we all know, that's what America is here for, right? To bring democracy to the Middle East, of course.
This regime is defeated, teetering on the edge of collapse, and must not be allowed to continue. the time has come to end this ruin and begin a new era for Iran. This is a new dawn for Iran's lion and son. I am here today to submit myself to my compatriots, to lead them down this road of peace and democratic transition. I do not seek political power, but rather to help our great nation navigate through this critical hour towards stability, freedom, and justice.
Dude, it's like, why are they doing this shit? You know, it's like, I don't know exactly who this guy is, but we have seen this playbook 1,000 times before in the Middle East, right? You know, somebody gets mad at whatever somebody else is doing. They're not free enough over there, right? That's our standpoint. We can't have any, you know, non-democracies, you know, around the world. So if you have something other than democracy, that's just not going to work for us, you know. We just can't have that. You know, as far as I'm concerned, this is America and America first, all right? And where's all these America first people? You know, all of them are crickets in the background. You don't hear nothing about them about, you know, Trump bombing Iran for no reason. What America first policy does that come from? You know, last I checked, that's putting America into danger, you know. Massive anti-war, anti-Trump protests have recently erupted in New York City, or just New York, and Washington, D.C., primarily in response to recent U.S. airstrikes on Iranian nuclear facilities and the Trump administration border policies. So let's look at that real quick. Hell yeah. Bunch of free Palestine stuff in there. No war signs. Yeah, I mean, this is what we want to see in America. We want to see them promoting no wars, right? At least that's what I want to see. No war. Yeah, I mean, obviously there's going to be protests all over the country, right? So now we not only do we have another No Kings protest is supposed to happen this weekend, we now have anti-bombing campaigns, anti-war campaigns, you know, stopping ICE campaigns, like you name it. Campaigns for everything, you know. Let's watch this J.D. Vance interview on... Who did this interview? I don't know. I think it's Fox News Live now.
Right now. Well, first of all, we've wanted to come and check out what's actually going on the ground, show some support to the FBI agents, the National Guardsmen, and the Marines who have been here, I think, bringing peace to what was a very chaotic situation thanks to the leadership of Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass. If you really think about what's at stake here is the basic principle of, do we get to enforce federal immigration law when the people's duly elected president says we've got to enforce our borders? And I think obviously the answer is yes. And what you saw in Los Angeles was really, I think, a conspiracy of the mayor, the governor, and a lot of radical left protesters who are going to say, no, we're not going to let people enforce the immigration laws of the United States of America.
Right.
We in the Trump administration had a different attitude towards that. Obviously, you've seen that immigration happen all over Southern California. I think we've now restored some order to Los Angeles, and thank God that we did, because I think absent President Trump's leadership, you would have seen the city really spiral out of control, which we don't want. I think it's a beautiful city. It's got a lot to offer, but you've got to be able to enforce immigration law.
So the riots have stopped. There's still protests, and
Sure.
there's still a lot of tension out there. It feels like something can explode at any moment. There's a lot of anti-ICE sentiment in LA.
Yeah, we're going to just have to wait and see what happens with, Trump and his escalatory policies, right? So, I mean, if Trump wants to carry on with, doubling down with the National Guard, doubling down with the military, I think last I heard there was, something like 700 Marines being deployed in the streets, of LA. And, that's ridiculous. We shouldn't be having untrained military deployed in our streets. The military is trained, but they're trained to do a certain task, and that's kill everything they see, right? But they're not trained for riots, the riot control. They're trained to kill. That's what they do.
LA. What's your metric for determining how long the military is going to be here in Los Angeles? Things are calm right now. Are you going to keep them here for a while in case there's more activity? When do you pull them out?
Well, I think what the president says, you got to do this case by case, right? See how this goes, see where we are in a few days, ensure that you don't have the increase in rioting activity. I mean, look, when these riots break out, people can't access basic services. Stores get destroyed. People's economic life is destroyed. And of course, if the riots really get out of control, you have people violently attacked. And that's, of course, what drove this initially, is you had FBI agents who were actually being attacked by a mob, and the Los Angeles Police Department, great people, by the way, but they were being handcuffed by their police.
That's right. They did start as protests. They started as protests, and the LAPD specifically said they have it under control, right? And then Trump wanted to escalate it, therefore calling in the National Guard, even though Gavin Newsom told them that he didn't want the National Guard deployed, right? So that was step one. That was already illegal, And then Trump said, well, Gavin Newsom is just a dumb guy, new scum. He loves a poorly ran city. That's kind of what he does. There's poorly ran cities all over California. There's nothing we could do about it. California just really sucks. Super duper bad, guys. You don't even know. Even though California pays for 20% of the states in America because they can't afford their taxes, But, we're not going to talk about all that, that's just the truth, California has a net surplus of tax dollars to the federal government. And most of these red states around the country, Tennessee, Oklahoma, North Carolina, all these states have a net loss or whatever on taxes. So they have more money coming in from the federal government than they have going out to the federal government, basically. And it's always the poorly ran Democrat cities. Yeah, I mean, who cares? You could say whatever you want, but these states are successful and these red states are not successful. That's just the truth, the fact of the matter.
Political leadership from enforcing the law, saving our FBI agents, and preventing violence against federal law enforcement. So we're going to pull out the troops when we feel confident that level of instability is not going to return. But of course, when that happens and when the president makes that decision, of course, it's easy to put people back in if you feel like that rioting starts to ramp up again.
At the beginning of the administration, the idea was worse first, right? Targeting the worst of the worst criminals.
Sure.
You guys are still doing that, but we're also starting to see Home Depot's getting hit, car washes, agriculture workers. Is the net widening? Because we hear, there's targets, they want 3,000 arrests a day. So are you guys widening the net in terms of who you're going after now?
Well, first of all, Bill, let's step back and appreciate just the radical success of the Trump administration. Simply through having a president who cared about border enforcement, we've gone from close to 3 million illegal border crossings per year to actually net negative illegal immigration in this country. In other words, we're deporting far more people than are coming in illegally into our country. That's exactly what should be happening. And that really all it required was a president who empowered federal law enforcement to do the job of enforcing our borders. So, yes, you're right. Now, what do we do? What the president has said is we really want to focus on the illegal immigrants who came during the Biden administration, but also we're enforcing everywhere. In other words, the president has said if you are an
If it was just about illegal immigrants, then it wouldn't be a problem, right? I mean, I'm all for mass amnesty. I think we should make pathways to citizenship and make magic happen. It boosts the economy. Everybody's happy, except the bigoted hillbillies that they wear red hats and whatnot. But yeah, if it was just criminals, just strictly criminals, I don't think anybody would have a problem with it. See, the problem comes when you call everybody, illegal or whatever. I mean, crossing the border illegally is a misdemeanor. It's not a big deal. Who cares, dude? Whatever. The fact of the matter is that, they're deporting, they're kidnapping kidnapping these people and sending them to, slave labor camps in El Salvador. How's that all right?
illegal immigrant into this country, you ought to voluntarily go back and come through the proper channels, because we don't want people who have come into the country illegally just staying here indefinitely. That's not the policy of the Trump administration. We've empowered law enforcement to really enforce the law. Yes, we're focusing on the most violent criminals. We're focusing on people who came here illegally over the Biden administration. But put simply, if you came into the country illegally, if you're not a legal resident of the United States of America, you ought to go back home and come through proper channels.
So basically, it's what Tom Homan has said repeatedly. If you're in the U.S. illegally, you're on the table.
If you're in the U.S. illegally, you are at risk of deportation, though obviously we're focusing law enforcement resources on the worst offenders, on violent criminals, and on people who came here recently. That's the main focus. And unfortunately, thanks to the Biden administration, there are millions upon millions of those individuals. We're going to try to enforce immigration laws primarily against them. But yeah, Tom Homan, the president, I'm going to say it right now. If you're in the country illegally, you are at risk of deportation, because you shouldn't be here if you're not consistent with the laws of our country.
So you're here in a big sanctuary city, Los Angeles. There's been a lot of resistance in sanctuary cities across the country, Boston, here in L.A. Activists, you've even got politicians interfering, some politicians getting arrested for interfering with ICE. Is there any...
I will say most people have no idea what sanctuary city even means. Basically, a sanctuary city is a city where immigrants are safe from police harassment. And they put this in place a few years ago, in the 90s, I want to say it was. And this was due to police wanted to have cooperation from immigrant communities. And the only way they were going to have cooperation like that is if they made a sanctuary cities, saying that, we're not going to, look into what you're doing and, harass you and just kick you out of the country, deport you. All we want to do is speak with you about what's going on in the community to get answers for the people that are actually being criminals, But, yeah, I mean, right now, sanctuary city is just a buzzword for Republicans to spew. And basically, You know, just another word like communist or whatever, you know, a scary buzzword that they can use and, you know, tell their followers to be afraid of everything that's going on.
World in which these activists and politicians throw enough sand in the gears for ICE and the Trump administration to where you guys slow down some of this enforcement. Karen Bass says ICE has to just flat out stop. Is there any world and that's a possibility?
No, that's ridiculous. But you are right that they're trying to throw sand in the gears of enforcement. That's what we see with a lot of these ridiculous court cases. The good news, Bill, is that you're starting to see that the courts start to side with the Trump administration on this very simple principle that the American people elected more border enforcement, and that's exactly what the president is trying to deliver. So I think that with the courts doing what they're doing, and you see us ramping up the deportation efforts, I really do think that you're seeing the enforcement against illegal immigration take a step forward, not a step backward, even though you're right, a lot of far left politicians are trying to change the dynamic. Now, here's the thing, though, about those politicians is how crazy is it that we have a country where you have elected representatives of the American people who seem far more interested in illegal immigrants than they do the citizens of their own country. When Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass give Medicaid to illegal immigrants, let's be honest about what they're doing. They're literally taking medication and medical services away from poor Americans so that they can give it to illegal immigrants. Why?
Republicans are just so fucking scared of everything. Like, why don't you just come out and say, like, we hate these people, we're bigoted, we don't want them to have anything, you know? But he's basically coming out and saying, you know, we don't want our citizens to have it, but we also don't want illegal immigrants to have it. You know, JD Vance is over here acting like he vouches for Medicare for all. You know, he doesn't. What kind of medical services does he want given to Americans? Ones that they can't afford, and, you know, it'll hopefully kill them over time. You know, JD Vance doesn't want what's best for this country. I mean, neither does Gavin Newsom. Let's get fucking real. You know, Gavin Newsom, a few years ago, they had a vote for Medicare for all, or it was like their version of Medicare for all or whatever. And he vetoed it. You know, it passed their state house and state senate, whatever it was, and he vetoed the fact that, you know, they were going to subsidize everybody's health care in the state, which would have been such a fucking great move, because that would have been one that trickled down reverberated, if you will, throughout the nation, and really just been a great policy all in all. You know, that's something that would have went towards Oregon and Washington, and then, you know, New York, and, you know, every sane state would have adopted a Medicare for all type system. But yeah, JD Vance fucking sucks. What are you going to do about it?
Why would you want to do that? And why would we be surprised that when you do that, you have an illegal immigration problem on the scale of what they have in California? Immigration enforcement actually should work, states and the federal government working hand in hand. Gavin Newsom should be saying, we're not going to give free benefits to illegal aliens. We're going to give those benefits to American citizens. Meanwhile, us and the Trump administration are going to enforce immigration law. That symbiosis, that working together, I think will make the American people safer, and it'll make our country much better off. But look, if you're going to have politicians like Karen Bass and Gavin Newsom who try to fight immigration enforcement, we're going to use every legal tool at our disposal to get illegal immigrants out of our country. That's what the president was elected to do, and he takes it very seriously.
Last question on this topic. If Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass see this interview, what's your message to them?
Our message to them is very simple. Just do your job. It is so simple to have a country where you do well by the American citizens, by the people who have the legal right to be here, and you enforce the law against people who have violated the law. I don't know why this is a...
Dude, your daddy right now, Daddy Trump, has violated the law more than probably any other politician out there, in modern times at least. This dude has 34 felony charges on him. He's literally a convicted sex offender. You know, what more do you need to, hear yourself talk? Follow the law. Like, what are you talking about, dude? You're following the biggest crook in history right now. I don't know if there's ever been, historically speaking, a more crooked president than we have right now. This dude literally dropped a shit coin, for his followers to, pay for, made himself something like, what was it, like $600 million or something, walked away, rug pulled his constituents, and you don't hear nothing about that no more on the right. They love him for that shit. He also took a $400 million jet from Qatar. The Qatari government gave him a luxury personal jet that, oh, yeah, well, I'm going to replace Air Force One with it, until he doesn't. And then, he takes it with him when he leaves office. If he leaves office, I mean, we don't know if he's actually going to leave office or not, but I don't know.
Controversial proposition. I don't know why Democrats and Republicans can't agree on it. Republicans under President Trump are very clear. We don't want to let people who are in our country illegally stay in our country. We want to enforce the border. We want to make it safe for American citizens to live good lives in their own community. Meanwhile, you have Karen Bass and Gavin Newsom, who seem to want to do everything that they can to make it harder to enforce the law, to empower violent rioters to assault federal law enforcement officers. I mean, Bill, I guess my message to Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass is, why don't you empower the great people of the Los Angeles Police Department to put down some of these violent rioters rather than encouraging them? Why don't you tell illegal immigrants to comply with the law rather than encouraging radicals to assault our FBI agents who are trying to do their job? It's very simple. Support law enforcement. We think great things could happen for the state of California, but it's not going to happen if you have failed political leadership.
I do want to ask you about
we literally have failed political leadership on a federal level. We have a pseudo dictator in office right now that's overreaching as far as he can go by using ICE for something they were not made for, to black bag and deport all these people without due process and, whatever. Like, we don't know what's happening with a lot of these people. I mean, yeah, we're seeing videos all over the internet of what's going on and shit, but all these masked Gestapo agents walking around like ICE, we don't know who these people are. We don't even know if they're actually with ICE, a lot of them, And even if they are with ICE agents have no right to arrest U.S. citizens. And they specifically arrest U.S. citizens that they know are citizens. So it's like, they literally arrested a New York City mayoral candidate and comptroller. He got arrested for what? Because he was asking, if they have warrants for all these arrests. Because they're supposed to have warrants when they're arresting people, or else they may be arresting the wrong people, and they're not legally allowed to arrest U.S. citizens. ICE was originally made after 9/11 happened, under the guise of protecting from terrorists. They're supposed to be looking out for terrorists and whatever. And I believe Trump, when he signed one of his executive orders or whatever, when he got into office for his second term, classified, there was, he said something like, we're being invaded at our borders, classifying all these, quote unquote illegals as terrorists. Which is fucking bullshit, obviously. A lot of these people are just trying to flee bad economic things and war and fucking whatever, but we just can't have nice things in America. You know, that's just what we do here, not have nice things.
There have been all sorts of articles and media reporting about this supposed rift in MAGA world and amongst Republicans about what to do with Iran. How do you see things right now?
Look, I what the president said is so perfect about this. I think he gets to define America first because he's the person who ran, who was elected, and who actually leads this movement. And for all of the online chatter, what I see, and I've seen it very privately, of course, and I've seen it very publicly, the president is very focused on a core American national interest. And that national interest is the state of Iran should not have a nuclear weapon. We're pursuing everything that we can to make sure that happens.
And why exactly is that a American interest? So, basically, we know that Netanyahu's been going on and on about Iran having nuclear. They're this far away from having nuclear arms, which there's no proof out there that that is actually the case. The only proof that anybody has is the fact that they are researching nuclear capabilities for energy, you know, but Netanyahu doesn't want them to have that either. You know, what can they have? You know, they got to rub sticks together every night. It's fucking ridiculous. We are the world police, and we get to tell them what they can and can't do all the time, because that's how we roll as America. That's just what we do, you know.
Pursuing diplomatic channels. As you can see, we're supporting the Israelis as they engage in these military operations. We're shooting down Iranian missiles that are coming into Israel. We've been very clear we can't let Iran have a nuclear weapon. And so for the folks I think who are frustrated with something about the president's policy,
because if Iran has a nuclear weapon, then how are we supposed to bomb them whenever we feel like? You know, I think, I don't remember who said it, but it was somebody in the Pakistani government. And they said what Iran is going through right now would be us if we did not have nukes. And they're 100% right. You know, if they didn't have nukes, they'd have their, they'd have our boot on their throat, just like every other nation that doesn't have nukes. You know, I am not pro nukes for everybody, mind you, because I know the statistical fact, you know, the more nukes we have in the world, the more likely somebody is to use said nukes to start World War III. And that would be very, 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 very bad. Right? Right. Yeah. But that being said, if certain states aren't allowed to have nukes, you know, fine. That I'm perfectly fine with not everybody having nukes, but I think there should be a world order of peace stating that nobody can have nukes, and all 600 whatever nukes we have around the world should be disarmed, right? There shouldn't be any nukes. There shouldn't be any weapons of mass destruction. But if that was the case, America couldn't have them either. And we just can't have that, you know? So that's just not going to happen.
See, what I'd say is, do you think Iran should have a nuclear weapon? I think most people would say no. Has the president done anything other than use American influence and power to try to accomplish that goal? No, he hasn't. So support the president, recognize he's trying to do something that's very difficult, that other administrations failed to do, and that's end the Iranian nuclear program. I think he's going to do it, and he's going to do it by using clear, restrained, strong American leadership. That's what he was elected to do, and that's what he's going to do.
So how long do you give diplomacy a chance to work before it's time to drop a bunker buster?
Look, the president has to answer that question, right? And I think that what he said is he's going to pursue diplomacy until he thinks that there isn't an opportunity. And once he decides that diplomacy has completely run its course, that we're not going to get anything out of additional talks, then I think the president is going to do what he needs to do to end Iranian enrichment and end that Iranian nuclear program. Again, the president will make that final decision. I do think that we're running out of time, but as the president said yesterday, he wants to give it a little bit more time to see what diplomacy can accomplish. I think we're going to find out, and the Iranians are going to find out the hard way.
I don't know if Trump has ever even used diplomacy in his entire time he's been in office. All right, that's a lie. He's done diplomacy with North Korea, but North Korea has nukes, you know? So basically what he's saying is if you don't have nuke, you will not be getting any diplomacy. Not in Trump's America.
Or the easy way. What I'd tell them sitting here right now, Friday afternoon, is please, for the love of God, recognize the President of the United States is very serious about this. He doesn't want you to get a nuclear weapon. He also is more than willing to work with the nation of Iran if it's willing to disarm peacefully. But if it's not willing to disarm peacefully, then we're going to have other options on the table for the President of the United States.
You said you think we're running out of time. The president says he wants to take about 2 weeks to think about it. Is that within...
Well, we all know how that 2 weeks went, don't we? You know, rather than giving that 2 weeks, he instead did what everybody thought he was going to do and dropped the bombs over the weekend. So it didn't harm the stock market too much, you know, because the stock market is the only thing that rich people actually care about.
Your range?
Well, I think as the president said, he's not going to tell anybody exactly when or what he's going to do. He's going to continue working this process. He's going to let the diplomatic process unfold. And in the meantime, of course, the president of the United States can do whatever he needs to do, whenever he needs to do it to keep the American people safe. I think the president has a very clear sense of what he wants to accomplish and when he wants to accomplish it. But I'll let him to speak to that because right now his administration has been instructed, do whatever you can to try to solve this problem peacefully, because if we're not going to solve it peacefully, we're going to solve it some way else.
I'm not sure if you heard the president's comments earlier today. He was asked about Tulsi Gabbard, DNI Tulsi Gabbard's comments that there hasn't been intelligence that Iran is close to a nuke. And President Trump said that Tulsi Gabbard is just, quote, wrong, said she's wrong. There's been reporting that there's maybe a little bit of internal.
All right, anybody want to bet that Tulsi Gabbard's the first one fired out of his administration this time? I mean, anybody that has any dissent is going to be kicked out of it, you know, kicked out of his administration. He's done it many times before. I'll take that bet. Yeah, I mean, if Trump doesn't have 100% loyalty in his administration, he's not going to stand for that. And Tulsi Gabbard might just be the first one. Get cut loose, you know, because she is traditionally very anti-war. She is a scumbag politician like the rest of them. You know, there were some hopes back in the day for Tulsi Gabbard because she was very anti-war and had some good takes on things, but she flipped, and, you know, flipped herself into a goddamn administration seat, a goddamn cabinet seat for herself. But, you know, that might not be enough for Trump. If Trump's starting to say she's wrong, you know, is she going to push back on him? Like, no, actually, you're wrong, Donald. You know, you're the one getting us into this offensive war for absolutely no reason. There's no proof that Israel or Iran has any nuclear weapons. The IAEA has stated that they only have nuclear energy research being conducted. We would know for sure if they had nuclear weapons if we were still in the Iranian nuclear agreement. But, you know, like we went over yesterday, that had Obama's name on it. And we can't have anything that has Obama's name on it because that doesn't say Trump on it. You know, Trump is a very visual and name oriented person when it comes to getting things done, right? We know this because during COVID, when that was going on, he specifically wanted those stimulus checks to say, from Donald Trump, from your daddy, from the president of these United States of America. This check comes from me. It has my signature on it. Therefore, this money is coming from me. And, you know, it worked. There were a lot of people that, you know, fell for it. He had his name on the check and everybody was like, tight, man, money? The government has never done anything for me. So this is very strange, getting money. But, and you know, for his imagery, it worked. People bought it hook, line, and sinker, you know, but it doesn't really matter if he's just going to do whatever he wants anyways. I mean, he could have pulled out of the Iranian nuclear agreement and then a month later said, we're going to get into a new, better agreement. And that agreement is going to be the Trump-Iran plan. It rhymes. TR or TIP, the tip, just the tip. No nukes, just the tip. The Trump-Iranian plan. And, you know, he could have had the exact same diplomatic language put into that. And, you know, Iranians would have gotten back into it more than likely. But he didn't do any of that because they wanted to eventually get into Iran. You know, he wanted to have his very own version of Iraq, right? As a Republican president, that's your badge of honor. That's what you leave the seat in. You know, you have to leave with more chaos than you found it, right? So,
Internal turmoil going on. Is that true?
Look, first of all, this rift, whether it's a public rift or a private rift, what I see every single day is, number one, a political movement that's united behind the president's leadership because he's doing great things for the American people, and an administration that is very much united, especially at the senior levels, with doing what President Trump has asked us to do. That's true of Tulsi Gabbard. That's true of everybody else in the administration and the president's national security team. I think the comments that you're referring to are, frankly, a creation of the media. Tulsi's been very consistent that what the president has said about the Iranian nuclear program is true, that they're getting too close, that they're enriching uranium far above the level that would be necessary for civilian uses. The president's been consistent about that. Tulsi Gabbard and every other member of the national security team has been very clear about that. What I see in some of these questions is the media will say, well, Tulsi Gabbard said this. Do you agree with this? And then when you actually look at what Tulsi Gabbard said, she didn't say what the media accuses her of saying. And I think that's true in this case. It's true of a lot of other situations where the media puts words in people's mouths. But trust me, Bill, we're all aligned here. We all agree with what the president is doing. And I think he's trying to lead America to a place where we don't have to worry about a crazy regime getting nuclear weapons. That's a very important place to go.
Last question, we'll let you run. Obviously, a lot of people in President Trump's ear giving him advice.
Sure.
Whether it's the military, his cabinet, you yourself. What advice are you giving him?
The advice that I'm giving him is, sir, trust your instincts. He's got the best instincts of any president I've ever seen, of any political leader that I've ever seen. I think that he knows.
How many political leaders, how many presidents do you think he's been around? One. You know, I was like, I guess he was around Biden a little bit, but, you know, not too many, you know. J.D. Vance doesn't have that much experience under his belt. I mean, he wasn't there for Obama. He wasn't there for Bush. He wasn't there for Clinton. He wasn't there for Bush again. He wasn't there for Ronald Reagan, Nixon, Kennedy. He wasn't there for any of these guys. He's just throwing grass into the wind, you know, hoping for the best. You know, it's like, dude, Trump has horrible political instincts. Everything that he does makes the country worse. What are you fucking talking about, dude?
When diplomacy has run its course, and he'll know when ultimately he has to employ the American military to make sure that Iran doesn't have a nuclear program. But I think a lot of people, you're right, are trying to give him advice. But I think the president is incredibly focused on a very narrow thing. Iran can have a nuclear weapon, and he's going to use every tool at his disposal as president of the United States to ensure that.
We are now hearing from President Trump that Iran and Israel have agreed to a ceasefire. And I'm going to read this statement to give you a little bit of time to also kind of come to terms with what this means. And this from the president saying, congratulations to everyone. It has been fully agreed to by and between Israel and Iran that there will be a complete and total ceasefire in approximately 6 hours from now, when Israel and Iran have wound down and completed their progress, their final missions. For 12 hours, at which point the war will be considered ended. Officially, Iran will start the ceasefire, and upon the end of the 12-day war will be saluted by the world. During each ceasefire, the other side will remain peaceful and respectful on the assumption that everything works as it should, which it will. I would like to congratulate both countries, Israel and Iran, on having the stamina, courage, and intelligence to end what should be called the 12-day war. And this is a war that could have gone on for years, destroyed the entire Middle East, but it didn't and never will. God bless Israel. God bless Iran. God bless the Middle East. God bless the United States of America. God bless the world. This coming in from the president.
Well, that's something at least, huh? I mean, this could have been a very big escalation, but I mean, is this before or after that they bombed our troops in Qatar or whatever? I guess we're going to have to wait a couple more days to really find out what's going on. But if they're actually calling a ceasefire, you know, I'll take it. You know, this will just fall under the might makes right category. And Trump just had to flex his might just a little bit just to see where everybody falls, because he is mighty, okay? And everybody else is unmighty. So it's a very good thing. So, what are we at? 46 minutes right now. Let's watch this little Trump clip right here.
Macron, who's a good man, I said, "What are you doing?" He goes, "We're celebrating World War II, our victory." I said, "Your victory? Your victory? Tell me about that." And then I called somebody else, and I happened to speak to President Putin at the time. Now, in all fairness to him, he lost 51 million people, and he did fight. Russia fought. Sort of interesting, isn't it? He fought with us in World War II, and everybody hates him. And Germany and Japan, they're fine. You know, someday somebody will explain that, but I like Germany and Japan too. But Putin is a little confused by that, you know. He said, we lost 51 million people, and we were your ally. And now everybody hates Russia, and they love Germany and Japan. I said, let's explain that sometime, okay? But it's a strange world. But I will say this, look, I want them to go away saying how great our country is and how great our military is. And I was making all these calls. For some reason, I spoke to like 4 different places. Sir, are you celebrating? And I said, you know, we won World War II and World War I, right? We won them. And yet we're the only country that doesn't celebrate. Everybody's celebrating except us. And I said, we should celebrate too.
Fucking Trump. First off, Macron, he's the Prime Minister of France. He has a reason to celebrate because France was heavily occupied in World War II. So, yeah, I'd say they have reasons to celebrate. As far as Russia's concerned, yes, they were our allies in World War II. The reason nobody likes them anymore is because they're a goddamn dictatorship oligarchy that wants to take over as much as they can. You know, they keep on invading countries around them, you know, including Ukraine right now. So, you know, it's like, you tell me why nobody likes fucking Russia I got one last video that I'm going to take off. Just showing the new dynamic pricing has hit stores. I don't know what store this is, but this is crazy. I mean,
people are already destroying the prices change throughout the day. Plus 10%? Plus 10%?
yeah, dude, dynamic pricing. I heard about this. I wasn't really sure if this was actually going to come to fruition because it just sounded like a ridiculous notion. I feel like this is something that they're just, testing out in the Middle East or something, or not Middle East, but Middle America. But yeah, pretty stupid. Anyways, double tap that string. Give me a like. I would love it. Get them likes up. Like the video. If you like the video, a subscribe would be greatly appreciated. Really help the channel grow. And I'll see y'all